Well, good morning, church. Let's stand together. Let's start our time of worship this morning. Let's bless his name this morning. Amen. Blessed be your name in land that is plentiful, where the streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name when I'm found in the desert place. Though I walk through the wilderness, blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be your name when the sun's shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering. Blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. You give and take away. You give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your name. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. Amen.
Amen, and thank you. We're glad you're here this morning. I want to welcome you to our time of worship together. As we go to the Lord in prayer, we want to remember Carla, our pianist. She is with her dad, Carlos Pinkstaff. Most of you know who he is. Thought his cancer was under control, but it's back again. And he's in the hospital. He may get to come home this weekend, but they're having to draw fluid from his lungs and things like that. So be in prayer for him and for Carla, as she'll be traveling back sometime a little bit later on. So many other needs in our church family. We always want to be mindful of those. Bow with me if you would, please. Our Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you today for your blessings in our life. And Father, in times of trouble, in times of despair, in times of sickness, Father, you are with us. So often the devil would love nothing more than for us to feel as if you've abandoned us. Father, you promised to never leave us, to never forsake us. You said in this life there will be times of trouble, but we can have joy even in the midst of pain because you are with us and you've overcome all this world. And one day, Father, all these things won't matter anymore. We'll be in the presence of God. We thank you for that assurance today, Father. Give hope, give peace, give healing, Father. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. And amen.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. We sing holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. See you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing holy, holy, holy. As we sing, as the angels sing, they sing holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Oh, sing holy now. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Oh, lift your voice and sing holy together. Let's lift it to him. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. I want to see you. Your love, oh Lord, reaches to the heavens. Your faithfulness stretches to the sky. Your righteousness is like a mighty mountain. Yeah, yeah. to the heavens. Your faithfulness stretches to the sky. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. Yeah, yeah. Your justice flows like the ocean's tide. And I will lift my voice to worship you, my King. And I will find my strength in the shadow of your wings. And I will lift my voice to worship you, my King. And I will find my strength in the shadow of your wings. Your love, oh Lord, reaches to the heavens. Your faithfulness stretches to the sky.
Thank you, Chad. I know when Carla's not able to be here, that changes everything, so thank you for that. I was going to bring my ukulele and play along with you, but I thought better of that. Or my comb, yes, or the jaw, what's that thing used to, boom, boom, boom thing? Yeah, that thing there. Yeah, I got all those. All those. Just because you got them don't mean you can do anything with them. Romans chapter 12. We're going to look at a few verses there in our time together this morning. Romans chapter 12. I think I've told you before, I actually took piano lessons. It was a total waste of time and money for my mama. Yeah, I don't know who said that. Thank you, Sue. I knew it was somebody on that row. I was thinking farther to my left, but that's okay. Don't you wish you had done different when you're growing up? I had piano lessons. I had all kind of opportunities. I just never did take advantage of it. Now I wish I had of that. The ballet thing especially. Anyway, Romans chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. We want to continue our series, Live by Design, Not by Default. We've determined there are basically two ways to live your life. One is by default, one is by design. Default is very simple. That's what happens when nothing happens. Default is just putting on the cruise control, just go, just let life go. Do as you please, do whatever you want, whatever feels good, just do it. That's the default position. Whatever is the natural position is the default. The design part, however, is a little more challenging because that means you have a plan or somebody has a plan for you, in God in this case, of course, and he has a plan for you, and you are constantly choosing and making decisions and examining and correcting when you get off course. So that is the life by design. The problem is, for us, is that our default position in this flesh is alien to God. It's to disobey God. It's to do what the flesh wants, to do what feels good, to do what brings us pleasure without consideration of what God desires. So if you're going to live by default, you're going to live alienated from God. You're going to choose against his word. You're not going to give regard to what he wants, and it's not going to matter. You're just going to go out here and live life today, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow you may die. That's the default position of the flesh in which we live. Some of you may remember that before becoming a believer. You remember that default. You just sort of lived life. It didn't really matter. You may have felt guilty about some stuff. You may have heard your mama's voice in your ear saying, don't do that, or your grandma saying, don't do this or that. But you just lived life how you please. That's the default position. But I don't want to live that way. Certainly as a believer, I don't want to go back to my default position. I want to live by design. I want to understand God's plan for my life, and I want to live that, and I want to accomplish all he wants to accomplish in my life and through my life. That's life by design. That takes effort, that takes work, that takes a constant attention to how my life is going and making corrections in my life as I go. We've talked about the default position. We talked about that with Paul in Romans chapter 7 when he said, I don't do the things I ought to do. I do the things I don't want to do. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me? And of course, Jesus Christ is the answer to that. So even the Apostle Paul struggled with flipping back to the default position. So if you're struggling, somebody came up to me the other day and said, I've really been struggling with this issue in my life. And I said, good. And they looked at me rather odd. And I said, well, I'm glad you're struggling, because when you're not struggling, you've been defeated. Keep struggling. Keep pushing. Keep fighting. You're not going to be perfect. You never will be. If the Apostle Paul couldn't get it right and keep it right, what hope do we have? But at the same time, our desire is to continue to move toward that design position, to live out God's will. Don't give in to the default. Last week, we talked about the choosing, why it's so important to choose. We talked to Joshua as he had the people gathered there at Shechem to send them off into the promised land to begin life without the training wheels, and how important it was that they choose, that they make decision, because you don't know when your life's going to end. I don't know about you, but there have been some days I would not want to have stood before God in my life in its present condition, in my thoughts in their present condition, in my actions, in my feelings, how they were. Joshua says, choose you this day who you're going to serve. And the reason for that, number one, is you don't know if you have tomorrow, and you don't know, sure enough, that what's going to happen. But the main thing, too, is while you're waiting to choose, you've already chosen. Your default is automatic. Unless you choose against the default, you are living the default position. Well, today we want to move a little bit more of how to do it. How do I choose? How do I live my design, not the default position in my life? The first thing I want you to notice is start with God. Start with God. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise, but the Bible tells us this. It says here, Paul says in Romans, he says, give yourself to God because of all he has done for you. Give yourself to God. Choose the design position. Move away from the default. Surrender yourself. Live for the Lord because of all he's done for you. This is reminiscent of Joshua last week talking to the people. And he reminded them, you're living in cities you didn't build. You're eating from gardens you didn't plant. Everything that God has done for you. And he's asking us here, this is really an invitation to consider, what has God done for you in your life? When you consider everything that God has done for you, how could you not serve him? How about you? What has God done for you? Go ahead, count your many blessings. I'll wait. Never mind. I don't have that much time. Because it would take a long, long time when you began to think about everything that God has done for you. And Paul is saying, when you consider everything that God has done for you, how could you not serve him? How could you not decide and choose design over default? Why would you ever want to go back to living the old way? Why would you ever want to choose disobedience over what God wants you to do? The problem is, for most of us, for me anyway, is I start with myself. I don't start with God. When I start with God and I think about everything he's done for me, and then I realize how he wants me to live, I'm motivated to live for him. But the problem is, if I start with me, I'm motivated to live how I want to live. If I start with me, I think about what I want, what I desire, how I like things, how I don't like things, what I want, why I'm going to have my way, I'm going to do what I want to do, what feels good to me in this flesh. If I start with me, I'm going to end up in default all the time. If you want to end up in design, if you want to live out God's plan for your life, you have to start with God. You can't start with somebody else. Well, so-and-so thinks this, so-and-so thinks that. Well, what if so-and-so thinks something bad? You still going to go with so-and-so? It doesn't matter what so-and-so thinks. It only matters what God thinks and what God says. You must start with God. If you don't, you're going to end up right back in the default position in your life. Make God the foundation of everything and build out from there. And then when the temptation comes, when the desires of the flesh come, you stop and you compare. You compare, freely compare. Think about the temptation and then think about what God has done for you. Think about what God has done in your life, how he's blessed you, what he's given you, how he sustains you. Think about all those things, and you compare all of that to the temptation the devil has brought to you. You compare all of what God has done for you with what you're wanting to do that goes against God. Do that. Make a comparison. Not only, though, be careful, don't just compare what God has done for you up to this point. Think about what God has done for you in the future. Think about what God has done for you in eternity. And do I really want to live out the flesh? Do I really want to disobey God in comparison to everything he's done for me? All of a sudden, the temptation doesn't look as tempting, does it? All of a sudden, the temptation doesn't look as favorable to me when I stop and think about all that God has done for me and how I can hurt the heart of God by disobeying. All of a sudden, God's taken all the fun out of sin. He's taken all the desire out of that when I compare everything that he has done for me. Start with God. Start with God. If you start with you, you're going to find a way. You're going to justify. You're going to excuse. You're going to disobey the Lord. You're going to live by the flesh, even though you know it can hurt you, and even though you know you will regret it. How many of us have ever done things that we knew we were going to regret, but we did them anyway? We start with ourselves. The flesh, spirit's willing. Flesh is strong. How many times? Let's bring it home. How many of you have ever tried to lose weight before? It'd be quicker to say who hadn't tried. How many times have you just gotten to the point you can't help yourself? You see that big old thing sitting there, that big old donut, or you see that big old whatever, and you just got to have it, and you got to have it. And you know good and well it's going to keep you from your goal. You know good and well you're going to hate yourself after you eat it, but it sure is good going down, isn't it? Then after it's gone, you wish you hadn't done it. You can kick yourself. And then what happens? You're defeated. What do? Well, I might as well eat another one. I've already messed up today. You've done that. You've been there. Donuts and stuff like that may not be a big deal, but when it comes to choosing God, choosing obedience, or falling into disobedience, that is a huge deal. Start at the wrong place, you will end up in a worse place. Start with God, you'll end up in a good place. Start with self, you're going to end up in a worse place. The second thing I want you to notice, he says not only start with God, but sacrifice yourself. Be a living, holy sacrifice. This means to completely be at God's disposal, be available to God, be willing to obey God, whatever he asks. You say, well, this is an oxymoron. This contradicts. How can you be living and be a sacrifice at the same time? That doesn't make sense, because sacrifice means that something is being given up. Something is dying. This makes perfect sense in the spiritual realm. Even as you're fully alive, you are choosing to die to your will and to your desire. That's what it's talking about. A living, yes, I'm alive. I have a will. I have a desire. I live in the flesh. I have the default position. My tendency is to do the wrong thing. My desire, the temptations come to do the wrong thing. I'm very much alive, but I am making a choice in my life to not give into that. I'm dying to that which I would rather do than obey God. Because of everything God's done for me, I'm going to choose to obey God. That's all it is. That's what he's talking about here. That's all he's talking about, is being alive but choosing to die to self. Your flesh has desires. That's your default. But you choose to live God's way. That's the design. But I want to do what I want to do. I want to do the wrong thing. I want to live my own life how I choose. I understand. That's your default position. That's why you must start with God. How in the world can anyone choose against themselves? How can anyone choose to die to what they want so you can live to what God desires? How can anybody do that? I think it's very simple. That which I'm choosing for must be greater than that which I'm choosing against. Well, I want to do this, and my desire is pretty strong, yes, but when you compare everything God's done for you, you discover that it pales in comparison to God's blessing in your life. That's all you do. You compare. You start with God, you compare everything that God has done for me. How can I choose against what I want? How can I choose against such a strong temptation? How can I choose against what I think will make me happy right now? Because when I compare it, there is no comparison to everything that God has done for me. Therefore, I want to obey him. Makes perfect sense. This sounds so easy, doesn't it? Right here sitting in church, this just sounds so easy. But when you get out there, it's a lot harder and a lot more of a challenge. That's why it's so important that we study and we learn and we understand what's going there. Back to what God has done for you. Nothing this world has to offer, nothing the flesh desires is greater than what God has done for you. Choosing design over default is easier when you start with God. There's the third thing. Set yourself apart. He said, be a living and holy sacrifice. This word holy, it simply means to be pure, but it also means to be separate. Separate. It means to separate yourself, to cut out yourself. It's a call to separate yourself from the flesh. Separate yourself from the default position. Cut yourself off from the flesh and the selfish desire that comes from the natural flesh. It's saying present yourself to God separate from the flesh and to be holy. Why is he admonishing us to do this? Why does he have to tell us to do this? Very simple. Because it comes natural to do the wrong thing. It comes very natural not to separate myself from my earthly desires. It comes very easy for me to not separate or cut myself out from the world and the flesh and the desires of this world. That's the hard part. That's why he's having to tell me to do that. You've had people tell you stuff. Well, I don't need you to tell me how to drive. You ever said that to your spouse? I know what I'm doing. And you're going to miss this turn. And then after they tell you that, I know what I'm doing, you realize they were right and you were missing your exit. So then you try to act like you were planning on going to the next exit. Did that this past week. Wouldn't admit it to Lori, but I did it this past week. She still doesn't know I didn't mean to miss that exit, so don't tell her. Sure. We default position. Default position. Comes natural. Cover ourselves. Well, set yourself apart. There's a fourth thing. Don't let the world decide. Don't let the world decide. He says, don't copy the world's way or the world's behaviors. That is the default position. Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its mold. The idea here is like a masquerade, if you will. I don't know if you ever go to a masquerade party. I figure everybody figures out who I am regardless if I wear a mask or not. But you put on a mask. That means you're presenting yourself out here different than how you are on the inside. That's what he's talking about. He's saying, don't let the world make you act a certain way that's different than who you are as a believer on the inside. That's what the Apostle Paul was talking about in Romans chapter 7. I don't do the things I should do. I do the things I shouldn't do. And he's talking like he presents himself out here sometimes one way, when on the inside that's not really who he is. That's what we're talking about here. What he's saying, don't let the world decide for you. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit in and you don't even realize it or don't even think about it. You say, well, I have to live in this world. You're right, you do. And the Lord speaks to that. He says, you are to be in the world, but not of the world. You got to live in this world. Yeah, you do. Wouldn't it be nice if you could all stay in here and just live here? Some of you think, well, I don't know if I want to live with all these people or not. It's nice, though, like around Christmas time when you're home with your family and you got some time off and everybody's there, and then it comes time to go back to work. Don't you wish you could just stay right there with everybody in your house and not ever have to leave the house again? That's what happens when you have a new baby. Those of you who have little children, when you get that baby home and all the family's there and you get a little time off work, you just want to stay right there. You don't ever want to leave that house. And then kids get a little bigger, get a little older, start wham-wham and all that stuff. Now you don't want to stay in that house. You want to leave that house as quick as you can. We understand that. But we have to live in this culture. We can't just stay in here. We can't just live in here. We have to live out there. Jesus said, you have to be in the world, but don't be of the world. Don't let the world mold you into its thinking, into its behavior. Cut yourself apart from that, even though you must live in that. I had a situation a number of years ago talking about with someone about how we are to live in this world, and this person made the statement to me, just blew me away. Said, well, to reach the world, we have to be like the world. I about fell off my chair. That's one of the first times I've ever said the word blasphemy to somebody. I didn't say it. I said, well, that's like blasphemy right there. That's not what the Lord says. We don't reach the world and go out and be like the world so we can reach the world. We go out into the world and be like Jesus so we can reach the world and show them something different. You've got to be careful here. Don't let the world deceive you. You say, well, I don't do that. I don't let the world dictate what I do. I don't let the world decide. I don't let the world mold me into something. Yeah, I hear you. Think about church directories for a moment. You ever looked at an old church directory? Seen the hairdos? Seen the outfits? Have you seen the glasses they wore back then? Oh, my goodness. I was talking to Shelby Stanton about this the other night. You seen her old directory picture? Her glasses were out to here. Her hair was up to here. I thought, Lord have mercy. But you don't look like that now. Why don't you look like that? Because somebody said, we don't want to look like that no more. And styles change. And here you are wearing what normal people wear today. You've been influenced by this world and you didn't even realize it. You hear people say, well, that's out of style. I hear that sometimes when I'm getting ready. My wife will say, well, that's out of style. Oh, who says? I didn't say. I didn't decide it was out of style. Somebody else apparently is deciding stuff for me, but I won't wear it because it's out of style. I'll say, well, honey, they wear that on TV. She said, they wear a lot of stuff on TV you ought not to wear. I got no chance. Got no argument. Isn't it funny how all of us have allowed the world to decide for us so many things without us even realizing? And I realize you go to the store, you can't buy them old-fashioned clothes no more. But you come to my house, I'll help you out. I get it. Some of it you have no choice. But if something like that, so silly, can affect you and change you without you even realize it's happening, how much more can this world influence you and mold you into its way of thinking in your life? Well, I had a discussion the other night with someone about things that were okay to do and things that are not okay to do. And man, you mentioned today about your class, y'all talked about some different things, what the Bible says about certain things that you may see out here in the world today. And in this particular conversation, I'm not going to go into detail of all this at the moment, but the question was whether something was okay to do or not do. And the statement was made, well, I think the Baptists are probably about the only group that says it's not okay to do this anymore. And I thought, that's interesting. The Baptists are one of the only groups that say this is not acceptable behavior anymore. And I just made the comment. Make sure the standard we're measuring with is God's standard, not some denominational standard. Because there are some denominations that say it's okay for all kind of things to take place that this book says are very wrong. I'll pause there, but we won't stop there this morning. Be careful whatever standard you hold yourself. Well, everybody's doing it. Lord of mercy. Young ever told you that when you're growing up? I said it to my parents. Everybody's doing it. Well, if everybody's jumping off a cliff, you're going to jump too. And I'd always say, well, yes, I think I will. That did not go well. Isn't it funny how easily we are molded into things and we set standards for our life based on standards that are somebody else's standards instead of God's standard? Be very careful that you follow God's standard, not somebody else. Well, I ought to be able to trust what the preacher says. I ought to be able to trust what the denomination says. Really? Really? I hope you can trust what I say. I will never lead you astray deliberately. I'll never tell you anything outside this book deliberately. I will not. But you know it as I do. There's a lot of denominations. There's a lot of preachers, a lot of teachers standing up and telling you stuff that isn't in this book. And this book says is wrong and they're saying is okay now. That's why you need to study, to show yourself approved. That's why you need to make sure Anything I say, anything anybody says, measures up with this book. Because you know what's going to happen when you stand before God and give him accounting for your life? You know what he's going to open up, don't you? He's going to open up the Constitution of every denomination ever existed and see if you measured up. No, he's going to open this book right here, and this is what your life's going to be measured. Be careful. Don't let the world conform you. Then fifth thing, let God transform your life. Transform your life by changing the way you think. This is interesting to me. Paul says, let God transform your life by changing the way you think. Well, thinking, is that really my problem? Or is my behavior the problem? Is it the way I act? You would think it would start with behavior. You would think you would say transform your life by changing your behaviors. But the problem is behavior is tied to circumstance. I'll act a certain way here. I'll act a certain way there. I'll act a certain way depending on the circumstances. People do it, right? Don't you act a certain way in church? You may not act at home. We all act differently based on circumstances. So you can't start with behavior. Well, what about feelings? Well, I think you need to change your feelings and then you'll change your behavior. No, he didn't say that. He said your mind. The problem with feelings is feelings are too tied to preference. If I like something, I feel something about it. If I don't like it, I feel a certain way about it. I can't trust my feelings. Have you ever felt a certain way and that's been wrong? Have you ever behaved a certain way and that's been wrong? Yes. Why do we start with our mind? Because from our mind, we develop our feelings and we develop then our behaviors. If you start in behaviors, you got a problem. If you start in feelings, you got a problem. If you start in your mind, that's going to affect all the other pieces. That's why he says that. That's what's going on here. He says that's why it's important that you start with your mind, the way you think. For your life to change, your mind must change. The way you think must change. Out of what you think, you feel, and then you act. Proverbs 23:7 says it very carefully. Whatsoever a man thinks, he is. Whatever starts in here, it's going to get to the feelings. It's going to end up in the hand. In the mind. In your mind. You ever thought about something? Somebody did something wrong to you? You thought about it and thought about it, then you begin to just feel anger and feel like you're going to get somebody and you're going to get revenge, and then you go punch them in the nose. Well, hopefully you didn't get to that point. That's what we're talking about. The way I think determines the way I feel, determines the way I act. It says your life will never be transformed if you're just trying to change your behaviors, because you're not dealing with what caused those behaviors. You'll never change your life, transform your life, if you're just dealing with your feelings, because you're not dealing with where those feelings come from. The only way to transform your life is to change the way you think, is to change your mind. This word here in Proverbs, in the Hebrew, the word means basically gatekeeper. That the way you think, your mind is the gatekeeper to your feelings. It's the gatekeeper to your actions. It's the gatekeeper to your life. So be careful that you make sure your gatekeeper is keeping the gate. Make sure that your gatekeeper is keeping the wrong things out, letting the right things in. That's the way you think. That's your mind. That's what the mind does. It's like people checking IDs, you know, when somebody, you have to be a certain age to go in a place, to check your ID. A lot of places now you go ride rides at amusement parks, you have to be a certain height to ride that thing. And the person's checking to make sure you're a certain height or make sure you have the right ID, or they're not going to let you in. The problem is my gatekeeper has been laying down on the job, and my gatekeeper is letting all kind of thoughts and ideas and things come in, and therefore my feelings and my behaviors. Your mind is your gatekeeper. Your mind is your gatekeeper, watching the gate. Make sure your gatekeeper is measuring by God's standard. Make sure your mind is measuring by what God says, not by what people think, not by what people feel. Make sure of that. Your mind is the gatekeeper for your feelings and your actions. We're molded in part by what we think. What we think is molded by what we hear and what we see, and our gatekeeper determines those things. The devil's not after your behaviors. The devil's not trying to get you to act bad. The devil's not trying to get you to feel bad. You know what the devil's trying to get you to do? He's trying to get you to think bad. Because if he can make you think wrong, he can make you feel wrong and make you act wrong. That's why he says the mind is so important. Does the devil want you to do bad stuff? Sure. Does he want you to feel the wrong kind of way? Sure. But he's not just going to start there. He's going to start in your mind, and he knows if he's got your mind, he's got your feelings, and he's got your behavior. There's a final thing. He says, then you will know. Then you will know. Then you will know God's will for you. Isn't that what we all really want? God's design, God's will for us? That's why there's such a battle for your mind. That's such a battle going on with the gatekeeper. The devil wants to keep you in the default position and further his agenda. That's not what we want. That's not what we want at all. We want to know God's will. We want to know the design. We want to live that out. That's why the devil is so much trying to get in your mind. You've had thoughts pop in your mind that you would never have had, right? That's where the devil comes in. Very seldom do I find that I've behaved in such a way that I didn't realize it was coming. Very few times if I felt something, I didn't realize why I felt that way. But all the time, I have thoughts pop in my mind, and I'm thinking, where'd that come from? That's the devil. That's the battle of the mind. And he knows where to get you. It can be the least little thing. It can be almost nothing. And he triggers something in your mind. And if you're not careful, you're going to dwell on it, and the feelings will come, and then the behavior will come. And all that time, you are not in design mode. You are in default mode. And that's what the devil's trying to do, is keep you from living out God's plan for your life. He knows he can hinder you. He can hinder God through you. And that's what he's trying to do. That's why it's so important. Do we really want to know God's will? If we do, we've got to make sure we're living out the way to know it. He tells us this. He says, then you will learn to know God's will for you. If you do these things, then. He doesn't say you'll know God's will, so don't worry about this other stuff. He says, all of this, then you will understand God's will. You will be pushing away all the things the devil will bring to hinder you. You'll be pushing away the flesh. You'll be pushing away personal desire. You'll be pushing away the temptations. You'll be pushing away all those things. Then you will begin to know. You will learn to know God's will for you. That's the design. I don't know about you, but I've spent a good bit of my life living in the default position. I'll flip-flop back and forth too much sometimes. I want to live by design. But you start with God. The problem is when we don't start with God. Back in 1979, there was a flight of 257 people, I believe it was, flying from New Zealand to Antarctica on a sightseeing tour. They were flying there. 257 people. The pilots didn't realize when they took off, the instruments had been set for the course and all of that. And they were experienced, but they had never flown this particular flight before to this destination before. And the readings, the calculations were off by 2 degrees, just 2 degrees. And that ended up putting them, by the time they left the airport and traveled there, that put them about 28 miles off course. 2 degrees, just 2. Ended up being 28 miles off course. That put them dead set headed for a live volcano that they crashed into, and 257 people were killed. About 2 degrees. Off course. What's my point? My point is this. You don't start with God, ain't no telling how far off course you're going to end up. It's never going to be good. You say, well, it's just a little thing. I'm just doing this little thing. Well, it may be a little thing right here, but next year, how big is that thing going to become in your life, in your family? It's important where you start. Important where you start. You say, I wish I had GPS in my life to keep me back on course when I start going, oh, did I mention? You do. You do. Just that simple. Man, it sounds so simple in here. It just seems so easy when you talk about it and lay it all out, doesn't it? But we can't stay in here. So many things in my life I look back on and I realize I ended up where I ended up and how things ended up because I compromised way back here. Just one little bit. 2 degrees. This morning, where are you? Where are you starting? Where's your starting point? Is it with the Lord? Maybe you realize you've gotten off track and you don't know how to get back on track. That's easy. Go to the Lord, confess it, ask him to forgive you, readjust your life, start with God, all the things we talked about, and there you go. You're done. That's all you have to do. But you got to live it every day. That's the challenging part. That's the hard part. Well, you may be here this morning and your gatekeeper is asleep at the wheel. You're letting all kind of stuff in. You're reading this, listening to that, watching this stuff. All that stuff goes in. From the world, it's going to be attracted to the flesh, and therefore you need to change the way you're thinking. So you may need to wake up your gatekeeper. You may need to fire your gatekeeper and get you a new one. Maybe that's what's going on with your life today. Whatever it is, you may be good. You may be good. You may be on design, and you may be living like it. All this stuff may already be happening in your life, and you're plumb near perfect this morning. But I doubt that's the case of any of us, certainly not myself. So maybe we need some course adjustment this morning in our life. If you do, the altar's here. I'm here if I can pray with you. And if you don't know Jesus, that's where to start. That's where to start, by turning your life over to Jesus Christ in faith. I've been seeing on television a commercial by Franklin Graham. Have you seen that, talking about the Bible but basically the plan of salvation? And he's talking about, and he mentions that the Bible is still, and it has been forever, it's still the best-selling book year after year after year. Why do you think that is? And it ain't just because them Gideons putting them in the hotels, if they even do that anymore. It's because people are looking for something. People are trying something. People want something different than where they are. They realize they're hopeless. You have that hope. And as you live your life for Christ, instead of letting the world mold you, you begin to impact the world for Jesus. You say, well, I can't change the world by one person. No, but you can change one person. You can let one person see Jesus in you, and you will never know what will come of that. Didn't you come to Jesus by somebody's thumbprint being on your life? Isn't there somebody that had something to do with you coming to him? He saved you. They had an influence. Maybe it's just that you need to strengthen up that influence in the world we live in today. I'm here if I can pray with you. The altar's here. Would you stand, please, as Chad leads us?
Worthy, you are worthy, King of kings, Lord of lords, you are worthy. You are worthy, King of kings, Lord of lords, I worship you.
Thank you for being with us this morning. A couple things before we go. Don't forget, I think the announcement went out, Mike, this week about FOTET. We'll not be meeting here this month, but they will be having the meeting at Burnsview Baptist Church as normal. You can watch it on Facebook. It'll be live streamed on Facebook, so you are able to do that. And that'll be March the 14th. Is that next Tuesday? A week from Tuesday, isn't it? So keep that in mind. We're not going to be able to have it here. And the reason simply is that we don't have no projector up here. That empty spot is an empty spot. It's coming this week, I think. Is that right? Or next week? Or next week? Put in on the 13th. Didn't want to chance it on the 14th just in case something didn't go quite right. So, but we'll get back to that next month. Also, don't forget, our ladies are having the prayer time Tuesday. Tuesday, 10 o'clock. And we have another announcement for our seniors. Wanda, go ahead and share with us what's going to be happening. Got a microphone? Oh, honey, this is too important. This is too important. We can't let nobody miss this. I think. They don't? Okay, this is too important. You're going to see why in just a minute. You're going to want to be a senior in just a minute.
I hear you. As all of you know, we've had a lot of issues for the last year or so with most of us that are leading or working in the Young at Hearts, our senior group. And we have worked out something hopefully for this Friday. We're going to try to get started back on doing more and being more active, because it's very important, as our pastor shares with us all the time, that we get together and have fellowship and just spend time together and grow as a group and share the love and everything. So this Friday, Lord willing, and it's supposed to be raining, so just have an umbrella and God be with us. Hopefully the break in the weather will be about time. But we originally set forth the 3 on this Friday, but we're going to kind of move it up to 3 o'clock because the fish camp we're going to is in Georgia, Washington, Georgia. It's Booty's Fish Camp. And anybody 55 and up that's in our senior group or that would like to go, we encourage you to be here at 3 o'clock on Friday. We're going to go down and overeat and have to ask forgiveness, I'm sure. But we want everybody that will to go, especially our ones that have recently retired, that, like Mike and Peggy, Debbie, Dan.
There you go.
I'm not going to start really naming. But anybody and everybody that likes sea fish and all that stuff, we'd like them to go. And as something we can do, we are planning, senior adult funds are gave to us by the church, and we haven't done anything with that in quite a while. We don't feel like maybe we can reach out totally for the bill, but a couple we will pay high, and a single we will pay high. So that way it'll make it more affordable, and we encourage all of you that can to go. We're planning to hopefully have both vans available and cars if we need them. So 3 o'clock on Friday, plan to be here. We look forward to the time of fellowship and the good food. We especially wanted to do this because we know Jack is going to be having surgery the following week, and we wanted to do it this coming Friday so that everyone in Washington can go because they have been wanting to do this. We want to get to do this. We love all of you, and we look forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock on Friday. Any questions or any concerns? Call me at the house or call Steve or Linda, one of us here. You can't hear me? I thought they could hear me.
Well, I heard you fine. I don't know.
Does
Yeah.
anybody need to know any information? Gotcha. I'm used to my big mouth, and I don't need this ordinarily. But if you didn't hear me and there's any question whatsoever, feel free to ask. Just plan to be here. We look forward to it. And we want to get some things started quarterly for our seniors so that they will know they're loved and appreciated and not forgotten.
Right, amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, Wanda. Couple of things there. You can go by. I just want. Is there a sign up? Okay. Do you want a sign up sheet or just? No, I'll hold it. No, you.
If we could get